go to this podium. So Senator Shaheen proudly represents the state of New Hampshire. She's the first woman in the U.S. history to be elected both the governor and the U.S. senator. She's a trailblazer with a reputation for working across the aisle to get things done. She served in the Senate since 2009 and is a member of the Senate committees on Armed Services, Foreign Relations, Corporations, Small Businesses, and Entrepreneurship. More importantly, she has been a great and long-term and supporter for the Syrian people and their fight for dignity and freedom. Thank you, Senator, so much for coming today to say hi to the community and to provide some brief remarks. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm going to stand up so I can see everyone and you can see me.
Great.
I started out as a teacher, so I like to be able to see my class, see who's paying attention, so I can reach out and touch you and wake you up if you're falling asleep. But thank you for that nice introduction and for all of the efforts that you are making and others here are making to try and keep elected officials like me informed about what's going on. It makes a huge difference. And I wish I could stay for the entire discussion today because it's a discussion that comes at a particularly critical time for Syria, for the region, and for the United States, given everything else that's happening in the world. And Ambassador Jeffries, it's nice to see you here as well. We all know that this conversation is long overdue and that the United States has been grappling with what approach to take on Syria for decades now, really. I remember being one of about 10 people in the Foreign Relations Committee who voted to take action in Syria when President Obama drew that red line, and then Syrians crossed it and we didn't defend it. So we are way past due at developing a real approach on the part of the administration. And it's not just been this administration, it's been across both Democratic and Republican administrations. We've struggled to try and figure out how to address what has become a real intractable conflict. But I think we ignore what happens in Syria at our own peril. The Assad regime continues to commit atrocities against its own people. It has yet to be held accountable for that. Iran and Russia are using Syria to deepen their own security collaboration to pursue strategic and economic policies that promote their own regimes. ISIS remains a destructive force in Syria, where it presents a threat of coming back to both the US troops and to our Kurdish and Arab allies. And we shouldn't accept this as the status quo. We've looked at ways in which we can try and address the situation. Some of you may remember the Syrian study group that came up with recommendations to try and help develop a policy in the United States to address what's happening in Syria. Out of that came a suggestion to put in place an ISIS detainee coordinator, which is something I've tried to champion. We expanded the authorities of that coordinator in last year's defense bill. The US's ability to secure the detention and refugee camps in Syria would be an important step toward addressing the continued security threat posed by ISIS. And I have to say, the last time I was able to raise this in an armed services hearing, I did hear that there was some hope that more countries were willing to take back detainees, and we were seeing some of that happen. But the events of the last 7 months have demonstrated that our leadership is essential in the region. The Hamas terrorist attacks on October the 7th made it very clear that the problems that we face are all interconnected. You all know this. That's why you've been working so hard for such a long time. We can't address the threat of Iran without confronting its role in Syria. To do so, we need a coherent, we need a comprehensive policy that isolates Assad, that recognizes what his allies in Tehran and Moscow are trying to do, and that provides humanitarian assistance for the Syrian people. I think we've got to be clear-eyed about our objectives there. There's no easy victory. There's no silver bullet solution here, but we need a policy. It needs to be a policy that can survive Democratic and Republican administrations, and we need to begin to execute on that. So again, thank you for the work that you all continue to do to keep this issue front and center, to raise it with policymakers here in Congress. And I look forward to continuing to work with you and to listen to the recommendations that you have about what needs to be done there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Senator. It's good comment from the audience also. That another was discussion about the anti-Assad normalization bill that has passed in the House with a really massive majority back in February, and that has been moved up to the Senate and should be hopefully within the Senate's formulation jurisdiction. Wanted to just make sure you hear our plea as a Syrian American community. We really are in need for this bill to pass through the Senate's formulation committee so it becomes a law as soon as possible. I think back to your remarks, that's really one essential way for us to counter Assad and his managers in Syria. So we would love for you to support that bill all the way until it's passed.
I haven't seen that legislation, but we will certainly take a look at it. And I can't imagine that we would not support it, but one of the things I've learned is that it's important to figure out what you're supporting before you agree. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Chairman Wilson is probably represents South Carolina's 2nd District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman Wilson serves as a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he is the chair of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia Subcommittee, and also a member of the Subcommittee on Europe. He is also the most senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, where he is on the Subcommittee on Readiness and also Strategic Forces. Chairman Wilson is very well known to us in the Syrian American community. He is one of the very few, well, I think many champions within the House of Representatives for the Syrian American community, and he championed the most recent bill, the Assad anti-normalization bill, that really grabbed a vast majority vote in favor back in February. So very appreciative to his long standing support and standing Syrian people, and also appreciative of his time today. Thank you, Chairman. Please.
And ladies and gentlemen and friends of Free Syria, I want to thank you all for your success. We were able to get the legislation passed overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives because of your good work. And it was the good work of all of you contacting members of Congress. It was just a wonderful day to see the recognition of the hope for a free Syria in the future, and to identify, sadly, the abuses of the Assad dictatorship. But it needed to be done, and you were successful in doing that. And now we need to make every effort to block any effort of normalization with the Assad regime. And that would include normalization by not just the United States, with so many of our allies. We need to stick together. And I'm so grateful that we have the leadership of so many good people who are here who make a difference. And I also want to point out how sad it is that we see the continued collaboration of the Assad regime with the dictatorship in Moscow, with the war criminal Putin. The association is so oppressive to the people of Syria, but also oppressive to the people of Russia. And so we have a situation that's so clear, sadly, and that is that there are dictatorships that rule by gun, and they're invading democracies that rule by law. And over again, we see examples that need to be addressed. But one of the very first ones, indeed, is the dictatorship Assad, and I still cherish very much the bipartisan efforts, even members of the House of Lords, the Senate. You can count on them to be here today. And by working together, Republicans and Democrats working together for a free Syria. And I know that I still cherish what happened when President Donald Trump told the dictator Assad not to use chemical weapons. And when he did, he was at dinner, I believe, at Mar-a-Lago with President Xi. And President Trump said, I've just gotten a message. I need to do something real quick. I'll be right back. And y'all continue the dessert. And he did. He went back and ordered the attack on the locations from which the attacks had occurred. And that's how you deter dictatorships. And that is, it's an immediate response, not a week later or whatever. And so again, thank you. And it's bipartisan, as you have seen today, as our support for the freedom of the people of Syria. I've had the wonderful opportunity, sadly, of visiting a Syrian refugee camp in Jordan. And it was actually inspiring to see how well maintained it was by the people who live or have fled there, to see how entrepreneurial the people of Syria are. We know that in my home community of South Carolina, how revered people of Syrian heritage are. And so I just want to wish you well for continued success. And we've got good people like Omar Hosni who are available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So Omar, raise your hand. They need to know who to call on.
Yes. Right here.
And so, but again, the bottom line, congratulations on your success. And we need to be ever vigilant, though, about the potential of normalization, which should not occur. And it shouldn't occur by the United States or our allies. Thank you, and best wishes again for the people of Syria. We know one day there will be another bright future for the young people of Syria. God bless. Thank you.
Senator Jack Reed proudly represents the state of Rhode Island as the state's 46th U.S. Senator. Senator Reed works every day to help make the federal government more efficient, effective, and responsive to the people of Rhode Island. He has a proven record of working on a bipartisan basis to help solve problems and achieve results. Senator Reed serves as chairman of the Armed Services Committee, where he has played a pivotal role in safeguarding our nation. As a senior member of the Banking, Housing, and Affairs Committee, Senator Reed authored several key pieces of the historic Wall Street reform law and has been nationally recognized for his dedication to protecting the U.S. consumers. For the purpose of our meeting today, Senator Reed is also a long-term supporter of the Syrian people and their struggle for dignity and freedom. And we at the New England and Rhode Island State and Community, Syrian American Community, have been in touch with his staff and with himself many occasions, and we appreciate his time today. Thank you, Senator.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor, for those very kind words. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your leadership, you and your colleagues. It is an honor to be with you today and to be able to speak to the leaders of the Syrian American community as you try to help us shape appropriate policy towards Syria and the Middle East. I first want to thank the C4SSA for the work it's done in pushing forward advocacy for Syria. There are so many. There are, as you realize, so many issues that are confronting the United States at this moment that there has to be active engagement by the Syrian community to continue to remind the administration, the Congress, the American people of the concerns that we have and the difficulties and challenges we face. For many years now, we have found in Syria the Syrian Democratic Forces as valuable allies to assist us, and they remain critical to the success of our anti-ISIS campaign that continues. This close partnership has strengthened the United States and the Middle East, and we appreciate it very much. And I'm very, very proud to be able to support robust training for the SDF in the annual National Defense Authorization Act, which I have the privilege of chairing the committee. And as the chairman of the committee, I'm committed to maintaining this support as we begin to work on this year's bill, so that that force continue to operate. It's certainly a dangerous time in the Middle East. October 7th was a day that in many respects was a turning point in history, at least the recent history of the Middle East. Now we are, I think, united in our attempts to defeat Hamas, but we also should be conscious of the way to pursue these operations. We have to be very precise. Israeli allies in particular. We've seen thousands of civilians killed in Gaza. We have to, I think, be much more supportive of precision rather than just the use of force, blunt force. We also have to ensure that we have humanitarian supplies flowing into Gaza. One of the obligations under law and under basic human decency is that civilians who are not involved in the contact or combat should be cared for with supplies. And I have publicly urged the state of Israel to change its approach, to be more precise, and also to follow the example that we learned the hard way in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we conducted operations in Mosul and other cities that were similar to Gaza, but we did so very carefully. We did so with consideration as best we could with the civilian population. And that's exactly what we have to do in Gaza and elsewhere. We're also seeing, I think, unfortunate alignment of authoritarian governments, Russian, Iranian, North Korean, in their fight in the Ukraine, and to a degree, their efforts in the Middle East. And we are in a battle between democracy and autocracy, and we have to prevail. And we will be continuing to support those efforts as we go forward. We know that the Middle East will always be an important part of our foreign policy. We have been trying to pivot to China for about 20 years now. And I think we should recognize that we're not going to know where we can, that we have to be prepared, and it's a challenge to confront authoritarianism in Asia, the Chinese particularly, the Russian blatant attack, but also the continued upheaval in the Middle East. And I'll do all I can as chairman of the committee and as a member of the Senate to ensure that we do all we can for the people of Syria. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Before we do comment, just for your awareness, there is this new legislation that has passed the House now. It's called the Assad anti-normalization bill that had passed, I think, with 389 to 14 or so back in February 14, which is now under the jurisdiction of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But I'm hoping that you are aware of this legislation that has really been one of our main goals to pass as Syrian American community in the Senate. And I know with Senator Cardin and his leadership, we're hoping this bill will go through that jurisdiction. But any support from your jurisdiction also in case it goes into the NDA also pathway, I think would be really appreciated.
No, I appreciate that. As you point out, it is Senator Cardin's jurisdiction. They will have to, I presume, have a vote in the committee, but the NDA, in many times, is the engine that pulls lots of legislation. Not everything, almost everything.
Thanks. As some of you may know, Dr. Majid is a psychologist, is an American citizen of Syrian origin who has been detained within the Assad regime prison for the last several years. And his family has been tirelessly working to make sure his case is remembered and, is actively worked for by the U.S. administration and other decision makers.
All right. Thank you for having me today. I know this was unexpected and unplanned, but it's still an honor to be here today. My father is, yes, as Dr. Becker said, his name is Maryam KamAlmaz. He's a psychotherapist who used to travel the world to treat people that had suffered forms of trauma all over the world. He had been to Bosnia, Kosovo, Indonesia after the tsunami, in New Orleans after the tsunami, Katrina as well. And he was known for his work. He was a specialist in trauma. So of course, after the situation in Syria, he set up his office in Lebanon, and his institute was named International Institute for Psychosocial Development. His techniques to treat those that had suffered extreme forms of trauma were very successful, to the point where they awarded him Humanitarian of the Year award. And the HeartMath Institute has also designed a course inspired by his work. And so they are continuing his form of work even in his absence. They continued his institute. They kept it open for 3 years even after he was gone. On February 14, 2017, he went into Syria to visit family and was considering to open an institute as well. And he called my mother as soon as he arrived to a family member's house in Damascus, Syria. He let her know that he had arrived safely. Everything was fine. He had driven in from Lebanon legally without any issues. And then the next day, he was on his very first trip in Damascus, and he was stopped at a checkpoint. And all we know is that he did unfortunately have his American passport with him, and they must have seen him as some sort of a important person to possibly negotiate with, or to hold on to, or to get some sort of money. So 7 years and a half, and still no word from him. No case, no trial, no crime. The Syrian government has not even charged him with anything. He's been detained with no word, completely disappeared. The US government has picked up his case. The Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs has designated him as a wrongful detainee. They have requested information about my father. Unfortunately, the Syrian government is not responsive. They have yet to say or admit that they have him. However, the US government has been able to prove that he is within the Syrian prisons. Unfortunately, yet no proof of life or death. We're still anxiously anticipating anything to find out his fate. And it doesn't, unfortunately, 7 years down, it doesn't look too promising, especially knowing his age now. He's around 66 years old. Yesterday, we were invited to the House Foreign Affairs Committee for a roundtable discussion with congressional members, along with a few other American families of those that had American families detained abroad. We had the opportunity to speak about my father, to request from Congress action, to put pressure on the US government to do all that they can to bring information at least. And, 7 years, still not a single word from the Syrian government about his fate. What kind of government does this? It's absolutely unjust. And we continue to put pressure and continue to work as much as we can, coming down to DC as often as we can to meet with officials. We will be having a meeting as well with the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, as well as with the Hostage Recovery Fusion Cell and with National Security tomorrow to continue working on my father's case. It's an unfortunate situation with very little information known about him. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for sharing. I know this is so painful to share, but we really appreciate it on behalf of many countless detainees and oppressed people of Syria. So we can't thank you enough for your non-stop search and non-stop struggle get to know the fate of your father. May he be in best health.
Thank you, thank you. When I speak for my father, I also am speaking on behalf of the thousands of those detained in Syria. We actually have a voice here in the United States where people will listen, and being an American citizen gives us a privilege. So I do take that into heart, and when I am out there, I'm not just speaking for my father, I'm speaking on behalf of the thousands that are detained in Syria, the thousands that are disappeared. And it's very unfortunate. So I want to raise awareness on this very important issue.
Thank you, Maryam, so much. Here to join us. Quickly to introduce her, she is a mother, attorney, public servant, and a dedicated member of the Greater Lehigh Valley community for more than 30 years. In November 2018, she made history again when she was elected as the first woman to represent Pennsylvania 7th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Congresswoman Wild serves in the House Permanent Affairs Committee, the House Education and Labor Committee, and the House Ethics Committee. And we would love to hear from her today, and we appreciate your time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
The Syria American Committee appreciates your time today.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm Susan Wild. I represent, there it goes. I represent Pennsylvania 7, which is a community in Pennsylvania on the eastern side of the state, a couple hours north of Philadelphia, a couple hours south of Scranton. We have a very large Syrian American population. Anybody here from Allentown by any chance? Often I get a yes to that, but wonderful. Well, I just Bucks County, close enough. Okay, you know my area. So I'm here today to reaffirm my support for the people of Syria in their ongoing struggle to build a democratic future. It's something I've spoken to my Syrian constituents about many times. And for decades, we know that 2 generations of the Assad regime have maintained control through unconscionable levels of repression. This is a regime that has shown it that it is willing to resort to any tactic. Massacres conducted by government forces, bombing campaigns of civilian population centers, chemical weapons attacks, the blocking of humanitarian aid in an attempt to crush the spirit of the Syrian people. Although I will say, from what I know of the Syrian people, it's very hard to crush their spirit. That spirit was at the core of the uprising that erupted in 2011, and it cannot be extinguished. While Syria faces an Assad regime propped up by Iran and Russia, and an enormously complex set of challenges today, there are so many of us who will continue to stand with the Syrian people. This is a cause that transcends partisanship. Just this past February, I was very proud to vote for a bill introduced by my Republican colleague, Representative Joe Wilson, with whom I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Assad Regime Anti-Normalization Act, after having voted to pass it out of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. This legislation passed resoundingly, and that is a powerful demonstration of just how much support there is in Congress for the Syrian people's struggle for a future of universal rights and dignity. And so I'm here to tell you that as long as I am in Congress, I will continue standing in solidarity with the Syrian people and doing what I can to help advance their struggle to shape a future worthy of this people who have endured and sacrificed so much so that a future generation at last can one day live to be free. And so I'm proud to be with you. I'm happy to be with you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. The vast majority of our Syrian American community, Senator Jim Risch, is currently serving a 3rd term as Idaho's 28th senator. He holds longstanding commitment to public service and a passion for good government. Senator Risch brings his results-focused approach to governance to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee as a ranking member. The committee, he's also a champion of the Syrian American community and our struggle in Syria for freedom, dignity, and defeating the Assad regime. And his leadership has been unprecedented at these times. So we can't thank him enough for his time today that he was given to us as a community. Thank you, Senator, please.
The first question I have is, am I too early for lunch or too late for lunch? Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you all again today. It's always an honor to be with this group of Syria advocates. You've been tireless in your pursuit of accountability. Before I start my formal remarks here, I should report to you a little bit on what happened and why we weren't able to get the Syria Accountability Act into the bill that passed. That we had a lot of different things in. And I can tell you that we were aggressive about it. We tried everything we could to get it in. At the end of the day, we're not in the majority, so we don't control things around here. But there were a number. It wasn't all Democrats who were opposed, but the White House is very much opposed to it. And it was the White House that actually directed the Democrats to keep this out. So look, we're not done yet. These things don't happen immediately a lot of times, and we're going to continue to pursue that. So appreciate all your support and all the encouragement you gave us to go forward. But that's the way these things happen, and sometimes they don't get done as quickly as you'd like. So anyway, I commit to you that we will keep it done. Since we last spoke, the region has changed dramatically. Israel is almost 7 months into its justified war against Hamas. And Iran is emboldened and conducts attacks against our interests with near impunity. And the Biden administration's Syria policy remains adrift and unclear, at least it is to me. However, we have managed to score some wins. After years of inactivity, we finally squeezed Caesar sanctions out of the Biden administration. We legislated a strategy to counter the flow of drugs that fuel Assad's war against the Syrian people. And in the recent supplemental, we're able to pass additional sanctions against Assad's narco empire and those that support it. I was pleased to play a role in pushing those across the finish line. As I said previously, I was disappointed we didn't get a major bill in there, but there's more opportunities ahead of us. Looking ahead, I want to make 4 observations. First, the Biden administration must act. Its hands-off approach has allowed the conflict to fester. We must return to a policy of tough sanctions and international isolation to spur political progress. The administration must also more clearly articulate its objectives and the resources to get there. Secondly, next, the administration must better curb the wave of Arab outreach to the Assad regime. This includes sanctioning entities that support the regime. Thirdly, the Senate must act. Last September, I was proud to introduce the Assad regime Anti-Normalization Act in the Senate. In February of this year, the House companion bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, 389 in favor to 32 against. That is a major victory. Unfortunately, as I said, all of our efforts to move the Senate companion, including it into the recently passed supplemental, have been met with resistance from the Democrats. And also, as I've said, it's not all Democrats, but the White House is driving it. We can and should do better. Finally, we must seek accountability. While I applaud the actions of European courts to find Assad and his cronies guilty of various war crimes against the Syrian people, we need a formal accountability mechanism. Less than a year into the war in Ukraine, the U.S. established the Atrocities Crimes Advisory Group. The U.S., UK, and EU have provided $10 million to assist in documenting, preserving, and analyzing evidence of war crimes. 13 years into the Syria conflict, no such mechanism exists. The U.S. must remain committed to enforcing the law until the conflict ends, and those responsible for these atrocities must be held accountable. Thanks again for having me here today and for allowing me to be with you. Thank you for your efforts, your individual efforts to keep attention on the plight of the Syrians.